create a CGA script that is going to extrude our tile by a certain level. So there we go. Okay, so let's create a CGA script that's going to extrude our tile by a certain measure. So to create a rule, you right-click the rules folder and select new CGA rule file. And I'm going to call this extrude tile rule. This is going to be a very simple rule. We basically this is going to be a very simple rule. We basically are going to ask the program to take the shape and extrude it by a certain measurement. So the first line that we begin with is the start place. Where are we starting? So we're starting this at the shape. So the shape, the squared shape is our tile, and this is where we want to start the rule. And the first function, the first and only function that we want this rule to do is to extrude. And we're going to say extruded by -6. And basically this is -6 meters. And if you're wondering why 6, we did some test prints before this exercise with some 3D test prints, and we decided that about 6 meters is a good thickness for the base of the 3D model. So we created the rule, we typed in shape, which is where we're starting, and the function is extrude. So we wrote in extrude lowercase space parentheses -6 parentheses. This rule is good to go. We close it. And so now what we want to do is we want to assign the rule to the shape. A couple ways of doing that. You can simply just drag and drop the rule into the viewport and hover over the shape that you want to assign it to. So you can see that the tile is highlighted in orange. So it'll drop that rule onto that tile. Or you can, with that shape selected, you can select assign next to this rule file here in your inspector window, and it'll take you straight to your rules folder. So as you can see, we only have this one extrude rule in the rule folder, and you can select that rule and it'll assign it. So if you use your pan tool to kind of pan around, you can see that now there is a thickness to the tile base. So I'm going to turn this off, and we're going to work together on creating, and the way that you turn a layer off is by just unchecking it here. And you can also lock a layer if you're worried, if you're manipulating things and you don't want to accidentally change something, you could lock a layer as well. So we turned the tile off, and now what I want to do is I want to assign a rule that's going to extrude the buildings on this tile to a height that is equal to the number of stories that we have, and assign it a roof shape. So if I select a building, I can open this, expand this window here, the object attributes, and look at what my object attributes are. And this is all the data that you guys worked so hard to collect and verify for us. So for this particular building, we don't have a roof shape, a roof type in there. That's okay. So what's going to happen is it's going to automatically be assigned a flat roof. And we know that it's in our priority 3, which makes sense, right? You guys we didn't do field surveys of priority 3. And so we're going to use the stories. So all the data that you have, I know that some of you updated the stories QC, but for this exercise, we will use stories as the number of floors that each building will have. So for instance, this building should have 2 stories. And so there's a lot of other information about this. CGA scripts can get really complex and do a lot of different things, such as reporting energy consumption based on, you can write the script to calculate based on square footage or window to wall ratios, what is the estimated energy consumption and things. This can get really, you can do a lot of really interesting things with CGA scripts. For the purpose of this exercise, we really just want to create a physical 3D model. So we're going to, as I mentioned, just focus on that rule for now. So I'm going to right-click in my scene window. I'm going to right-click the building shapes, and I'm going to select all objects. And this is so that everything's selected, so when I create my rule, I can drag and drop it, and it'll affect every shape. So let's create our new rule. So we right-click the rules folder, select new, and CGA rule file. And we're going to call this extrude buildings rule. Oh, we don't need to say rule at the end, so just extrude buildings. So this one's a little bit more complicated. We're going to comment some things about our rule before we start actually typing up the rule. And one of the things we're going to, and the way that we comment is we put a bunch of number signs. So basically that's a way to tell, it's kind of like program etiquette sort of. It's a way to kind of like organize your rule. So I created this kind of like window. So let me expand this a little bit so you can see it better. I created kind of like a section where we're going to add information about our rule. And so we are going to add attributes to the CGA script. And the attributes are going to be based on the data's attributes. So for instance, we have a attribute called stories. And we want our CGA script to do something to these shapes that's based on this data. And that's kind of what we call attributing a rule, is adding information to the rule about the attributes of the data. So the attribute is stories, and we have to type it exactly as we see it in the data. So in the data, it's all caps. So we do all caps here. And I'm going to write 1 to 100 stories. It doesn't really matter what we put here. It's basically, oh, I forgot one little part, which is random. Okay, so basically what I told the rule is extrude these shapes to a number of stories that is randomly between 1 to 100. It doesn't really matter what we put here. I can put anything here, because later what we're going to do is we're going to have the rule also instead of this basically putting this information up here will allow me to select stories as an attribute to the rule, and you'll see what I mean in a second. We're going to have the rule actually read the attributes of the data itself, not be random. So for now, let's just attribute it, and it'll make some more sense in a minute, I promise. Okay, so let's begin our first function. Our first function is to begin at the shape, which is the building footprint, 2 dashes and a greater than sign. And what we want to do is, and also 1 tab. Just for neatness, you don't have to, you just kind of want the first function to kind of be highlighted a little bit. Okay, so the first function is to extrude. And we want to extrude it by an attribute. We don't want to just, with our tile, we extruded it by an absolute value, but this time what we want to do is we want you to take my attribute, which is stories, and do something with that. So we're going to have it extruded. We're going to extrude it by the number that's in there. But here's the thing. Our data is in feet and inches, but this program is in meters. So each story is approximately 4.3 meters, which is about 12 feet, I believe. And so what we want to do is we want to say, program, take the shape, extrude it by the number of stories that you have in your data, but multiply that by 4.3. And then after you finish this function, I want you to move on to a different function that I'm calling roof. Oops, roof. So basically, function number 1 is to extrude it. Function number 2 is to assign a roof.